The Well of Perception. She was lying in her bed, reading a book. The book told a story that went something like this. Once upon a time, in an unknown age, there lived a poor family somewhere on earth. They had a little daughter. This family, struggling even to find bread to eat, had another problem. Their little girl was considered very ugly. Only her mother would call her the most beautiful in the world, affectionately naming her Rose Beauty. Despite her mother's praises, the girl felt deep sorrow over her appearance, thinking, well, she's my mother. Of course she'd say that. The girl stayed indoors all day and would only go out after dark, even to fetch water. As time passed, the girl grew up and reached the age to marry. Her parents waited in the hope that a suitor would come and take their daughter's hand in marriage. But the girl, who didn't believe this would ever happen, had no such expectation. She was like a flower withered in the spring of her life. She barely spoke to her friends and gave short, dismissive answers like yes or no without looking at anyone's face. More time went by, and her marriageable age was slipping away. The girls her age were already married with children. One day, while waiting by the fountain to fetch water, a married friend of hers teased her.
Girl, are you never going to look at anyone?
These words deeply hurt the girl's pride, and she retorted.
What business is it of yours? If I'm not looking, it's my choice.
Her friend replied.
I guess you just can't accept your ugliness and are taking it out on me.
The girl answered,
It's better not to talk to you at all.
and left without taking water. That night, she couldn't sleep a wink and stayed awake until dawn. In the early hours of the morning, she secretly left her house and went to a well. She had become so fed up with life that she decided to end it. She stood for a while, gazing at the newly rising sun with her tired, forlorn eyes. Then she closed her eyes and threw herself into the well. However, the well wasn't as deep as she thought, and the shock made her faint. A little while later, the son of the local lord, who had just returned from hunting and was thirsty, came to the well where the girl's body lay. He immediately dismounted from his horse and looked at the unconscious figure. At first, he thought she was dead, but when he turned her over, he saw the most radiant face, with teeth like pearls and lips that smiled like a delicate rosebud. Overcome with emotion, he bent down closer. His hands trembled from excitement as he gazed at the beauty before him. His heart, burning with love, made him speechless. He then checked her pulse and realized she was alive. Slowly, the girl began to open her eyes. The Lord's son trembled with joy, and when their eyes met, she instantly fell in love with him. The young man lifted her into his arms and placed her on his horse, taking her straight to his palace. His father wondered where his son had found this girl, but trusted him enough not to question his judgment. A magnificent wedding was held, and the two were married. The girl, never having looked in a mirror, was astonished that someone like the Lord's son would marry someone as ugly as herself. As she was preparing for the wedding, she glanced at a mirror on the wall of her room and couldn't believe her eyes. She found it hard to recognize the stunningly beautiful girl staring back at her. But she said nothing to her husband and silently thanked God. It turned out that when the girl threw herself into the well, she had fallen into a magical well of beauty, and all her ugliness had been washed away, leaving her as beautiful as the perfect maiden. As she lay there, she thought to herself, I wish something like that would happen to me. If only I could find such a well and fall into it to become as beautiful. But she didn't realize that she had only heard the story from the girl's perspective. She had never listened to the Lord's son's side of the tale. One evening, the Lord's son had stayed out hunting longer than usual and was returning late. On his way back, he heard a mother and daughter talking by the village fountain. The mother was calling her daughter Rose Beauty, and the Lord's son became curious.
Who is this Rose Beauty?
He thought and came closer. The girl was making playful jokes with her mother, and her quick wit and lively words caught his attention.
How clever she is.
He thought to himself. He noticed how much she loved her mother and took on all the burdens without a single complaint, making light of it all with jokes. He was enchanted. That night, he thought about her all night long. He went to the fountain again the following day, but the girl wasn't there. However, by evening, she had returned with her mother. The Lord's son began watching their nightly trips to the fountain, and his interest in the girl grew stronger by the day. He longed to speak to her, but she was different every time he saw her during the day, her head down, her face hidden by her hair, avoiding everyone. Confused, the Lord's son couldn't understand why she ignored him, even though he called out to her.
Does she love someone else?
He wondered. But as years passed, Rose Beauty still hadn't married. She continued to go to the fountain with her mother every evening, laughing and chatting happily. The Lord's son would occasionally gather the courage to approach her. Still, she would quickly cover her face every time and rush away. The Lord's parents wanted their son to marry. Still, no matter how many beautiful women they presented to him, he rejected them all. In each one, he searched for Rose Beauty's wit, her voice, her spirit. To him, she had become the definition of beauty. On the day he found her unconscious by the well, he panicked, thinking something terrible had happened to her. But when he checked her pulse and saw she was alive, he was relieved and stood there, gazing at her for what seemed like hours. When she woke and looked into his eyes, he felt like he owned the world. For the first time, she wasn't hiding from him. They talked on their way back to the palace, and he found her conversation as delightful as he had imagined. He told his father that he had finally found the girl he wanted to marry, the one he had waited for all these years. His father gave his blessing, and they married. The girl had never really looked at herself in the mirror before. She had always believed others' hurtful words and saw herself as ugly. Even during the wedding preparations, she avoided mirrors. But the women preparing her for the ceremony kept commenting on her beauty. Finally, she turned, looked in the mirror, and saw a stunningly beautiful girl staring back at her. The truth was, the well had no magical powers. Beauty was in the eye of the beholder. If one sees something as beautiful, it becomes the most beautiful thing in the world.
If you enjoy it, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Feel free to suggest video topics in the comments below, and I'll consider creating content based on your ideas.